B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, February 22nd, 2019. It is a scripted drama that will play out starting this weekend in Venezuela. The script was written somewhere in the U.S., probably at Langley at CIA headquarters. And we are creating a provocation to enable the coup to take out Nicolas Maduro because he's a socialist. And he's also described as a strong man with a death squad. And some of that may be true. But the U.S. is not focused on any other strong men with death squads. Duterte in the Philippines, al-Sisi in Egypt, the House of Saud. Nope. We have selective focus. And anybody who believes that this is about getting humanitarian need to poverty-stricken average Venezuelans, well, it's just bullshit. And so we see the news roll out, the corporate media cooperates, it amplifies the sense of urgency, the crisis that must be addressed by foreign intervention. Mike Pence flying to South America to meet with this phony Lima group. It's a group that was formed just to justify intervention in Venezuela. Followed by reports eagerly amplified by the Washington Post here. Venezuelan soldiers opened fire on a group of civilians attempting to keep open a segment of the southern border with Brazil for deliveries of humanitarian aid. Yes, that great humanitarian force, the United States of America, is going to be the gringo again. So, multiple injuries were sustained by members of an indigenous tribe. 2 people were killed. When the opposition supporters sought to block the military vehicles by standing in front of them, soldiers began firing assault rifles. Now, I do not condone violence. I'm not on the scene. I cannot judge whether this was necessary or appropriate. But just like William Randolph Hearst told his people, send me the pictures, I'll create the war. This is a move that is very much taken out of that playbook. And of course, Individual 1 immediately denounces the shooting. The United States condemns the killings, attacks, and the hundreds of arbitrary detentions that have taken place in Venezuela. Mike Pence scheduled to be in Colombia Monday. Is he going to take a victory lap? And he's meeting with that instant coffee group, the Lima group. And it includes Canada, and this shows us the true colors of Justin Trudeau. Now, this is attempting a wedge. I've described it as a Trojan horse. And by trying to force through so-called humanitarian aid at borders with Colombia and Brazil, the U.S.-backed regime change coup group is showing its true colors. And the amount of aid that is trying to be forced through is minimal. Yesterday, we shared with you Max Blumenthal's video report from Caracas. Groceries are on the shelves. They are out of reach financially for many people because of the runaway inflation. But the crisis here is the result of years of intentional strangulation of the Venezuelan economy. The targeting first of Chavez, the coup attempt that failed and he was reinstated back in 2002. Fast forward to Maduro. He doesn't have the charm, the skills that Chavez did. And, yes, I do believe he has cracked down on his opposition, sometimes brutally, sometimes fatally. But he is in a battle for his survival. And the forces of evil arrayed against Venezuela today are likely overpowering. And the New York Times making a big deal out of the fact that a former head of the intelligence unit there in Venezuela, Hugo Carvajal, has broken with Maduro. And he claims that Maduro has presided over the deaths of hundreds of people. As I say, that may be true. But this is an opportunist who has decided to switch sides, hoping that he'll have a really good gig if Maduro is in fact taken down. And Mike Pompeo is gilding the lily here because Carvajal has said that years ago, in 2009, he traveled with Hugo Chavez to Iran, and I believe they made a stop-off in Syria. And there was a single meeting with a representative of Hezbollah who gave 3 rifles to one of the Venezuelans. And this is being blown up as how we've got to intervene in Venezuela because Iran and Hezbollah are there. And this kind of fiction is what we saw preceding the U.S. intervention in Iraq in 2003, with phony justifications at the UN fronted by Colin Powell, the lies about weapons of mass destruction, and as if we haven't seen enough bullshit being spread as propaganda in recent weeks. The Guardian, which is occasionally a credible outlet, they're based in Britain. They're all online now. They take donations just like I do, but they're not an independent media outlet. They present state-sponsored propaganda on a regular basis. So here's the capper today. Venezuela crisis threatens disease epidemic across continent, say experts. So there's a report published in The Lancet saying that due to the decline of the healthcare system in Venezuela, all of Latin America is at risk for the spread of Zika, malaria, dengue fever, and other illnesses that thrive in tropical climates. Now, nowhere mentioned here is that the strangulation of the healthcare system in Venezuela is a direct result of U.S.-led sanctions on that country. We have tightened those sanctions in recent weeks. We don't care about the public health impacts in Latin America. We want the goddamn oil. And so this kind of disingenuous yellow journalism is deeply offensive. It enables the warmongers. And they're feeling enabled right now. And to counter this, we have brave people like Medea Benjamin, my friend from here in San Francisco, co-founder of Code Pink. And last night in Washington, she crashed a meeting held by Carlos Vecchio, who is the appointee of the illegitimate Guaido government, the rump government, the government in waiting in Venezuela. And he, of course, is connected to the oligarchs and Leopoldo Lopez, the right-wing Popular Will Party. And so as the gathering was getting underway, Medea Benjamin, who's got real cojones, she walked on stage. She grabbed the mic. These people are a fraud, she said. They don't represent the Venezuelan people. They are representing the U.S. orchestrated coup. These people here want to take Venezuela to a path of civil war and U.S. intervention. Right on, Medea. She went on to say, this is a very dangerous situation. They want to create a crisis at the border that would be a justification for U.S. intervention. And the signs are clear to me, to this observer thousands of miles away, that the trigger has been pulled, the order has been given, the director has called action. And that's what we're going to see beginning this weekend. Also, I want to recommend one credible source for non-corporate coverage of the situation in Venezuela. Abby Martin and her Empire Files are providing excellent coverage, and in the show file for today's podcast, I've included a link to one of her recent reports. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, is taking her own tour of the southern border as she prepares to schedule a vote on Tuesday in a formal rejection of Trump's declaration of a national emergency at the border, which he announced last Friday. This would set in motion a process it's likely to pass in the House, not likely by a veto-proof margin. And then the Senate must take it up within 18 days. This is going to require Republicans to take sides and to decide if the opportunism of supporting Trump is too risky against the future possibility that a Democratic president could use emergency powers in ways that Republicans would not approve of. So far on the House side, there is one committed Republican, Justin Amash of Michigan, who's been on our side in fights over Fourth Amendment rights, ending surveillance. He's a rare Republican who has some sort of a moral core. And so the process will begin. And as kind of payback for this pressure where the Senate will be forced to take a vote, Mitch McConnell is dangling the threat that he's going to force a Senate floor vote on the Green New Deal, which is not even legislation so far. It's a resolution with a list of agenda items. But he wants to force people to take a vote on what he views as socialism. And that's how the game is played in the nation's capital. And here's a victim of Trump's cruel and vicious immigration policies that to me represent that the drawbridge is up here at Fortress America. A transgender woman who sought asylum in the U.S. in 2017 and was deported by immigration authorities to her native El Salvador was killed earlier this month. And this is the very threat that many of the people who joined caravans who came to our border and did not attempt to illegally cross. They're the kind of people who wouldn't care if there's a wall there. They knocked on the door at a border entry point and said, "I claim asylum." And we said, "Nah, we don't believe you. You know, it's not that bad. Just go back home and leave us alone." And more recently, Trump has forced asylum seekers coming to San Diego to wait on the Mexican side of the border. And this clearly inhumane and racist treatment, the idea that all of our border problems are on the Mexican border, that all of the threats that could enter our nation are brown people. That's what this represents. And then you add transsexual terms to it, and Trump just freaks out. And we have seen the death of a woman named Diaz Cordova, as a result of our inhumane policies. Defense lawyers at Guantanamo who are attempting in the 7-year pretrial proceedings to get all the evidence they need to defend Ammar al-Baluchi, one of the alleged ringleaders of the 9/11 story. Well, those attorneys now have confirmation of what they've long suspected, and that is that the CIA under Leon Panetta collaborated with the filmmakers who brought us Zero Dark 30, a movie that sold us on the CIA as an invincible organization, that sold us on torture as a reliable way to extract information, and that featured my old pal Leon Panetta, who was then the CIA director. Yeah, he was in the film, played by Tony Soprano. James Gandolfini was hired to play the role of the CIA director. And, you know, that's one of the things that really pissed off Dianne Feinstein and energized her to break ranks, and basically she ran the Senate Intelligence Committee's review of the torture program. And together with Barack Obama, Leon Panetta gathered forces to prevent the release of the full report and the redaction to, in some places, meaninglessness of the executive summary. And that report has all but disappeared. And a proven torturer, Gina Haspel, now runs the CIA. Thanks, Leon. Nice going. Well, Roger Stone has been given a full gag order. He appeared in the courtroom of Amy Berman Jackson yesterday, she wasn't taking what he was dealing. And he tried to adopt humility. Now, Roger Stone doesn't understand humility. He reminded me of Artie Fufkin. You remember Artie Fufkin in Spinal Tap? Paul Schaefer played Artie Fufkin, the record promo guy who was always taking the blame for everything that went wrong. Kick my ass. Come on, kick my ass. I'm really sorry. Well, in court yesterday, Roger Stone said, I am kicking myself over my own stupidity. Forgive me the trespass. He said he's suffering from extreme emotional and financial stress. His savings are exhausted. He used to earn $50,000 a month, but now he's having trouble making the rent. And he said, I can't rationalize why I posted this picture with a gun sight next to your face because I wasn't thinking. And the judge really hammered him. Mr. Stone could not even keep his story straight on the stand, much less from one day to another. He cannot remember the names of all the volunteers who worked for him 4 days ago, she questioned. She said he can continue to seek donations to his legal defense, but he can only note that he has pleaded not guilty without commenting on any aspects of the case. And my question is, Judge Jackson, could we make this permanent? I'd love to never hear from Roger Stone again. Prosecutors in the city and state of New York are scheming to file charges against Paul Manafort, and while it appears flatly to be double jeopardy to charge him with the same crimes that Mueller's cases brought to him, they seem to feel they can dance around that. They want to win at least one state-level conviction as insurance in case Trump pardons Manafort. Now, I think that would be a corrupt pardon and could be overturned in a court case, but I'm not an expert on that, and we will have to wait and see. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez loves to just sass back when she is attacked. So the billionaire Mercer family, through a front group called the Job Creators Network, bought a billboard at Times Square, and it said, "Thanks for nothing, AOC," referring to Amazon's decision last week to pull out of its deal in Long Island City. And as you know, I don't blame Ocasio-Cortez or any other political leader. I blame Amazon. They are so greedy, and they weren't getting enough of what they wanted in terms of, concessions from New York leaders. And so the Mercers, who funded Steve Bannon and put him on the board of Cambridge Analytica, they bought this billboard. Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "Few things effectively communicate the power we've built in fighting dark money and anti-worker policies, like billionaire-funded groups blowing tons of cash on whack billboards, this one funded by the Mercers." And later she made a reference to The Office. "Billionaires paying to put up an anti-progressive propaganda in Times Square is like the obscenely rich version of the scene where Michael Scott points to the Bubba Gump, saying, 'This is it. This is the heart of civilization, right here.'" Every day, I pause for a moment to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And I work off a list from PayPal here of people who contribute $5 a month, like Peter Hoffmeister, $10 a month, like Janet Price. Wendy Gebauer kicks in $5 a month. And let's see who's next on the page. Joey Perillo, the famous actor based in Philadelphia. He is a very strong supporter of this podcast, and I appreciate each and every one of you. And if you're not a subscriber, this is my soft pitch. You can do it. Come on over to peterbcollins.com. Click menu, click Become a Subscriber. You land on the sign-up page. You can choose $5, $10, $20 a month. I'm dangling the bonus gift of Dr. Justin Frank's Trump on the Couch for a new annual subscription of $50 and, of course, a mailing address in the continental U.S. You don't like PayPal? My mailing address is Box 150, 660, San Rafael, California, 94915. Jeff Skilling, who fleeced me of a couple of $1,000, he was the CEO of the scam company called Enron. They almost brought California to its knees. And before all that, I was, spending a little money in my retirement account, and I bought Enron for $60 a share. I sold it for 60 cents a share. Jeff Skilling was fully released from a halfway house after serving nearly 12 years in prison for the scam, the complex fraud and conspiracy scheme that led to the stunning failure of Enron. El Chapo may get a new trial. This broke today, and I was a little shocked to hear it. But it appears that the jury, and more than one of them, engaged in misconduct by intentionally ignoring the judge's orders. Every time he ended the day or sent them to deliberate, he said, stay away from any media coverage, don't communicate among yourselves or with anyone, and no postings, no research, no internet. And Vice News reports that at least 6 of the jurors ignored his orders. They have one who is unidentified, who appears to be speaking for the others. You know, we were told we can't look at the media during the trial. Well, we did, the juror said. And others read information that was kept from the jury. Well, even El Chapo deserves a fair trial, and I support it given this misconduct by the jury. Here's a bad cop in a little town in Arizona, where a 12-year-old girl visiting from Pennsylvania, who is a budding journalist, was working on a story in Patagonia, Arizona, when the local cop, Joe Patterson, threatened to throw her in juvenile jail. Now, she was running down a report of a mountain lion that had been seen. She was on her bike, her mobile unit, when she encountered the cop. And turns out she's got quite a following. She publishes at the Orange Street News out of Selins Grove, Pennsylvania. And she's been at it for a while, and she knows her rights. So the second time she ran into the cop in one day, she confronted him. You stopped me earlier, said that I can be thrown in juvie. What exactly am I doing that's illegal? And the cop, Patterson, you taping me? You can tape me, okay. But what I'm going to tell you is if you put my face on the internet, it's against the law in Arizona. Only that's a lie. And he has now been reprimanded. We don't know exactly what punishment because his personnel issues are confidential. Well, new story about Facebook gathering your data and a limited hangout, where they're about to announce that you'll be able to clear your history. But BuzzFeed and reporters Nicole Nguyen and Lam Thuy Vo have done a good job exposing that, and this is common to me, all right, on my desktop computer where I work all day long, I have a tab with Facebook. I don't log in and out of Facebook. I'm on it all the time. And they're able to tell where else I'm browsing, like the Washington Post, the Guardian, or maybe a porn site. And this new feature will not clear the browsing histories that are saved by Facebook and its partners. And that information is used to serve you ads about products that you may have searched for in a different browser window on a computer where Facebook was active. They're even able to get information on people who are not Facebook members. And this is a very insidious development. And I still haven't pulled the plug on Facebook. I get a lot of good information from listeners like you who become my friend on Facebook. I invite anybody to do so. I don't post anything terribly private there. But I am aware of this creepy collection of information on other things that I do with my computer, and I never gave Facebook permission to gather that information. Today over at Who, What, Why, one of my interview podcasts was posted, and I want to be very clear. I don't want you to listen to this podcast unless you have already seen the Oscar-nominated film Green Book. I don't want to spoil it for you. I saw Green Book without knowing the lack of factual basis for the vast majority of the film, and I liked it. I thought it was a good biopic. I thought the acting was good. It was well written. And then I started to read about critiques written by African Americans about this buddy film. It's kind of like Driving Miss Daisy. It makes white people feel good about their own dealings with racism. And because it's claimed to be based on a true story, I think it deserves scrutiny. And so I interviewed Wilmer Leon. He hosts Inside the Issues on Sirius XM, and he was contacted by family members of Don Shirley, the man whose name and likeness and part of his story are central to the film. But the perspective on the film is the guy who worked as his driver, Tony the Lip, or Tony Vallelonga. And the family members of Don Shirley say not only did they invent things out of whole cloth, but they mischaracterize him as possibly gay, as a boozer, as a guy who didn't know about fried chicken or Little Richard, and it bugs them.
Well, I think their objections, in summary, are the family is highly, highly insulted and offended that they were not consulted on the film, and that even now that they are raising their issues, which are incredibly legitimate issues, Peter Farrelly and Viggo Mortensen seem to be very, very dismissive about the family's position and unwilling to just admit they made a mistake and they're sorry.
So I invite you to take a look. I'm not issuing any indictments here, and if Green Book wins Oscar awards on Sunday night, I think the attention will be on Peter Farrelly and his zipper problems in the past. And speaking of those zipper issues, the CEO of Time's Up, the group campaigning against sexual harassment in the workplace, has announced that its CEO, Lisa Borders, resigned earlier this week. This is the result of an accusation of sexual assault that's been made about her son. She's not personally implicated. But the LA Times reports that a woman claimed that Borders' son touched her inappropriately during a healing session. Now, I have no way of evaluating this claim, but this occurs just in front of the Oscars when the host-free show is likely to hear some comments from presenters and award winners about the Me Too movement. And I've got a whole raft of sex-related news stories today. R. Kelly has now been charged with 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse in Illinois after a series of public allegations surfaced following the Lifetime docuseries Surviving R. Kelly. And I want to point out that the guy who's really driven the exposure of R. Kelly is a pop music critic for the Chicago Sun-Times, Jim DeRogatis. And in a previous lifetime, I organized the Music Journalism Awards back in the early 90s, and Jim DeRogatis was a winner, and deservedly so. And he deserves credit for whatever does ultimately happen in bringing R. Kelly to justice. Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, was charged today with 2 counts of soliciting sex from a prostitute. This was at a massage parlor in Jupiter, Florida. It appears that the 77-year-old football owner has made multiple visits to this place, one back in January, a few weeks before the Super Bowl. And to me, while the allegations that the women who work there may be victims of human trafficking, these massage parlors are all over the country. It is hardly a secret what goes on there. And I was interested to hear Rush Limbaugh on his radio show this morning offering details of the massage parlors in South Florida, like somebody who may be a patron. He also was bringing up new information about Jussie Smollett and the allegations that he bought drugs from the 2 men that he paid to stage the assault on him. And I just find this the hypocritic behavior of Rush Limbaugh to be fascinating. He never talks about his own drug abuse and addiction, and we know that he was caught returning from a sex holiday in the Dominican Republic on a private jet a few years ago. And speaking of those kind of antics, Jeffrey Epstein, who has a private island, had a private jet. He entertained Bill Clinton and, Dershowitz, Alan Dershowitz and a few other prominent people. We never saw that Donald Trump went to, there's no evidence that he went to Epstein's private island where young girls were the feature. But you may know that there was a plea deal that allowed Jeffrey Epstein to plead guilty to trafficking young women without getting into the federal laws that would have sent him to prison for a long time. And the deal ended up, he got 14 months in county jail, and he could check out during the day. He just had to sleep there. So Judge Kenneth Mara, U.S. District Court in South Florida, said that the plea deal robbed Epstein's victims of their rights, and the prosecutors who designed it broke the law. Now, one of those prosecutors is working for Trump as labor secretary. His name is Alex Acosta, and he was a U.S. attorney in South Florida at the time that the deal with Epstein was struck. So it remains to be seen exactly how far this will unravel. Meanwhile, the longest-running sex scandal and cover-up, that is the Roman Catholic Church, continues a special conclave at the Vatican. And this is so offensive and insulting. The point person from the United States is the Archbishop of Chicago, Cardinal Blaise Cupich. And he is suggesting that in the future, local bishops and lay people be given the power to investigate accusations of misconduct. Well, that's what's been going on for years. They've been covering it up for years. And the idea that a few changes in the process is going to restore trust is just so insulting. All of the American Catholic bishops should resign, without exception. I mentioned the Jussie Smollett case, and, I don't consider this to be a sex crime. It's just really bizarre behavior. And the new charges are that he bought ecstasy from the two guys that he hired to stage the attack on him that apparently was used to, he had hoped to use, to hold on to his job and get paid more money. And finally today, been looking for a spot all week for this. I want to praise Brian Sonnenstein, who covers prisons at Shadowproof, for revealing that here in California, at the Soledad State Prison, and at Corcoran, and at the place misnamed, I think, Happy Valley. Those are 3 large state prison facilities in the state, and they have been the scene of gladiator fights that are set up by guards. Sometimes they do it by mixing races in the yard when they know that rival gangs will mix it up. And other times they just put the guys out there and provoke fights. Then they fire tear gas on them and lock them back up. They do it for their entertainment. Sometimes they bet on it. Sometimes they use it to settle scores between prisoners. But this bad behavior by the inmates who wear the green uniforms and have keys has to be stopped. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it far and wide. You'll find it on YouTube. And I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.